Hey everyone, this is Tammy Painter, and you're listening to the Book Owl Podcast, the podcast where I entertain your inner book nerd with tales of quirky books and literary lore. And in this episode, we're getting in our Wayback Machines. Or maybe even our Way Forward machines, I'm not sure. Either way, we're traveling through time because Tuesday, the 8th of December, was Pretend to be a Time Traveler Day. And don't ask me what in the world that is supposed to mean, or what kind of presents it involves, but I'm sure Doc Brown and Marty McFly could clue you in. Before we start, just a reminder that this show is supported by you. Of course, since we're speaking about time travel, you could just use the fast forward feature on your podcast app to time travel past this part, but I'll try to make it quick. There are a ton of ways you can support the show, and most are super inexpensive, including, as I mentioned last time, just doing your normal Amazon shopping through the Amazon affiliate link you'll find on thebookowlpodcast.com/support. You don't get charged any extra, but every time you shop, I get an itty-bitty commission that helps contribute to the time I spend bringing you these tidbits of entertainment. And since it is gift-giving season, also on that page you'll find some snazzy Book Owl merchandise. I'll admit some of these items are quite costly and I don't earn much commission from them, but if you're looking for something unique to treat yourself this holiday season, there's books and stickers and t-shirts and what have you. Okay, enough of that. Let's get time traveling. Or more accurately, let's look at time travel in fiction throughout the ages. See, that's sort of like time traveling. I think we'd all agree that if we'd known what 2020 was going to involve, a time travel machine would have been a well-appreciated 2019 Christmas present. So we could just, skip over the year. But so far, science has let us down with its inability to come up with a time machine. Which means the best we can do is to open the pages of a book and journey along through time with the author's imagination. It turns out the concept of time travel stories aren't anything new. Hindu mythology includes what might be recognized as the oldest time travel tale. In the story, the king travels to meet the creator god Brahma for, maybe to chat over a cup of chai. But whatever his reason for going, when the king returns, he finds out decades have whizzed by in his absence. Which, if you know anything about physics, isn't actually too far off the mark. Assuming Brahma lived in the sky or on top of a very high mountain, science does show that time moves more slowly for people who are under less gravity. So, say someone up in a spaceship, they actually age less than somebody on Earth. It's a fascinating discovery, albeit an absolutely creepy one, and it has been proven using really accurate timepieces. But since this isn't the Physics Owl podcast, let's get back to the fictional side of time travel. Moving up the ages and shifting over a few thousand miles to the east, we get a collection of fairy tales from Japan that date to around 750 Common Era. One of these bedtime stories tells of a fisherman who decides catching fish really isn't how he wants to spend his weekend, so he heads underwater to hang out in a sea palace. And yes, when I was reading about this, I was absolutely picturing a scene from a Sea Monkeys ad. Anyway, the fisherman hangs out with the sea monkeys for a few days, but when he returns to the surface, after he takes a big gulp of fresh air, he finds out he's been transported 300 years in the future. And I do really hope he enjoyed his time in the sea palace, because obviously by this time, no one knows who he is, he's lost his boat, and all of his family have died. Which does make this a pretty miserable fairy tale, so maybe we should move on. So, while the idea of playing loose with time isn't anything new, it does take a while for technology to catch up with time travel. Even though machines were already making their way into our lives and changing them, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, these machines take a long time to work their way into fiction. And rather than jumping into a time machine, we find a lot of earlier time-wandering tales involve someone falling asleep and waking up in the future. Which kind of makes me wonder, if you force yourself to stay awake, will you go back in time? Think about it. Anyway, some of these sleepy stories include Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving, and that was from 1819. We have Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy from 1888. and The Sleeper Awakes by H.G. Wells, who we'll be returning to quite soon. And similar to the sleepyhead version of time travel, we have the conked on the head method of time travel. Not as comfortable as taking a nap. And probably one of the most humorous and familiar examples of this is in Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. There's a lot going on in this simple tale, but the title does pretty much sum it up. A man from Connecticut, named Hank Morgan, gets hit on the head, and this sends him back in time to King Arthur. Hank then gets captured by one of King Arthur's knights. He then uses his knowledge of the high-tech world of 1889 to convince everybody he's a magician, and that it would be a really bad idea to kill him. Hank tries to make things better for King Arthur and even tries to prevent Arthur from being killed, but to no luck. And this is probably one of the funnier things I found while researching this episode was, while the story was really well received in the US, in England, they saw Mark Twain's story as an attack on the institution of the monarchy. Yeah, so I imagine it's not being kept in the nursery for, bedtime reading for George or Charlotte or Louis. Anyway, so from these examples, it would kind of seem that most writers were obsessed with getting a glimpse into the future. But a few, and some of the earliest time travel stories in English, have our travelers going back in time. And these include the short story Missing One's Coach. This was written anonymously in 1838 for the Dublin Literary Magazine, and in it, our hero waits under a tree for a coach to show up, and while he's waiting, he falls asleep. Yes, another fall asleep time travel book. When he wakes, he finds himself roaming around in the 9th century, and he tries to tell people about the future. A few believe him, but most, as you might imagine, think he's a bit doodle-lolly. Another early example of backward time travel comes from Paris avant les hommes, and that's Paris Before Men. This was written in 1861 by the French botanist and geologist Pierre Boitard, although it wasn't published until after his death, which is too bad for him because it turned out to be a pretty popular story. In that story, we finally see someone time traveling without falling asleep or receiving a head injury. Instead, a magic demon sends the main character into prehistoric times where he gets to hang out with dinosaurs. And so maybe, I don't know, is that the precursor to Jurassic Park? Perhaps. And 20 years later, we get another backwards time-traveling tale called Hands Off by Edward Everett Hale, in which the main character goes back to ancient Egypt and tries to change biblical history by keeping Joseph from being enslaved by the Pharaoh. And while this is one of the few stories of someone going back rather than forward in time, it's also quite likely the first time a time travel book has the main character interfering and altering history. But why stick with the past or the future? Can't we have both? Yep, and Charles Dickens was ready to deliver that. Well, sort of. His A Christmas Carol, published in 1843, does take old Ebenezer back in time, but it's not as if he can really do anything while he's there. It's mostly just a memory the ghost of Christmas past is forcing him to remember. And really, if memory is time traveling, I guess I'll just time travel back to a really tasty sandwich I had in Strasbourg last fall. But Ebenezer does travel to the future, or at least a potential future. And the idea of being able to change this potential future is one of the key themes of time travel fiction. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come shows Scrooge an absolutely dismal fate, to which Scrooge says, men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if preserved in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. And so, because of what he's seen in the future, Scrooge does change his ways, and yay, Tiny Tim lives happily ever after. Oh, I hope that wasn't a spoiler for anyone. But most of us, moving on, when we think of time travel, probably aren't thinking of naps, or of blows to the head, or of creepy ghosts hanging out in our bedrooms. We generally have in mind a machine, like some sort of strange chamber, or perhaps a souped-up DeLorean, that moves our hero through time. And while H.G. Wells' Time Machine probably is the first book that springs to mind, he wasn't the first to come up with the idea of a man-made object making a mess of the world's timeline. In fact, we start out not with a large machine you step into, but with the clock that went backward, a story from 1881 by Edward Page Mitchell, and moving the hands of the clock shifted time. But unless you can open up the grandfather clock and step inside, it's still not exactly what we think of as a time machine, is it? It's finally in 1887 when we get Enrique Gaspar y Rimbaud's El Anacronopete, ooh, that's a mouthful, which is touted as the first story to have a true machine purpose-built for time travel. It's a huge iron box that's kind of like something straight out of a steampunk novel with pneumatic tubes that are driven by electricity. And weirdly enough, inside the machine are brooms that sweep themselves. Wait, isn't that a Roomba? Anyway, all is going well as the Voyagers visit various eras in the past, but then it self-destructs when they try to visit the day of creation. Seriously, people, you gotta try to not push things too far. But, of course, while there were predecessors, the book that really stirred up the popularity of the Time Machine was H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, cleverly titled. This wasn't Wells' only foray into wandering around in time. Just a few years before, he'd written a story called The Chronic Argonauts. And Wells had thought of turning this story into something else, but he wasn't quite sure what exactly. Then his publisher came along and asked to see a serial novel based on time travel. Wells didn't hesitate a moment to jump on the idea. The fact that the publisher was offering him the equivalent of £12,000 in today's money probably didn't make the decision too tough to make. And the result of that £12,000 was The Time Machine. And in this book, the narrator is relating lectures he's heard from a man who traveled to the future and discovered a race of people who, well, they seemed happy and living the good life, and they weren't having to work very hard. But the narrator, or rather the person giving the lectures, then realizes that it's because another race of people have been forced to toil underground to keep everything running smoothly. Much of the inspiration for this came from Wells' own childhood, where he and his family and the people they knew, they worked their fingers to the bone below stairs in, manor houses or for the wealthy, or they literally worked underground in mines. But, gah, that's a bit depressing, isn't it? These time travel stories, they're just not cheery. So let's wrap up time travel on a happier note, and that is a subgenre of the time travel concept, time tourism. Think about it. How many of us would love to take a time tour anywhere that isn't 2020? Well, in 1948, American authors Catherine Moore and Henry Kuttner wrote the novella Vintage Season, in which visitors from the future vacation at a rental home just when the owner wants to sell. Well, the visitors like his place so much they end up telling their friends all about the quaint little place. And, with a moneymaker like that, you just can't sell. Then there's Ray Bradbury's 1952 Season of Thunder, and I don't know, I guess having the word season in your titles back then was the thing. But anyway, in Season of Thunder, big game hunters get bored with killing off rhinos, lions, and elephants, and decide to time travel to go hunt dinosaurs. I mean, go big or go home, right? Anyway, the time travel genre started strong, and it continues to thrive today in books like Stephen King's 11/22/63, when a man has to decide whether stopping the assassination of JFK is worth losing the love of his life. There's also Diane Gabaldon's Outlander series with men in kilts, lots of kilts, and also features a woman who never seems for a moment fazed by the fact that she's gone back a couple hundred years in time. I don't know why, that just always bugged me. Michael Crichton, as I mentioned, brought the past to life with Jurassic Park, but he also took us back in time using some really amazing scientific research in his book Timeline, which I highly recommend. And of course, we can't leave off without mentioning Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, in which the most sought-after dining establishment is the restaurant at the end of the universe, also known as Milloway's. Milloway's, as you'll know if you've ever read the books or heard the radio program or seen the show, is the nearest restaurant in space but not time, and is a 5-star restaurant situated at the end of time and matter. And as with anything in the Hitchhiker series, it's a hilarious concept, especially how you make reservations and raise the money to pay for a meal there. But if you do raise the money, and if you do make your reservation correctly, you can watch the universe end night after night while enjoying your pan-galactic gargle blaster. And that is it for time travel in fiction, so that must mean it's time for your favorite updates. The podcast is obviously still plugging along, and I need to say another big thank you to Tierney of TierneyCreates.com for including the Book Owl's History of Cookbooks episode as part of her Thanksgiving celebrations. Other than that, my next episode will be a little bit different. One tagline for this podcast is everything books minus the reviews. But just to wrap up the year, I'm going to share with you my favorite books of 2020, a year when many of us got more than our fair share of reading time in. As for writing, as I mentioned last time, I put in the order for my proof copies of the first 2 books of my Cassie Black trilogy. Well, they showed up the day after Thanksgiving, and they came out pretty darn good. There's still a little tweaking to do on the covers to get them a little bit, better situated, but the interior looks great. This month I'll give the first book yet another read-through while also doing a full rewrite on book 3. And just in case you'd like to do a little shopping for yourself, all 3 books are currently on pre-order on most retailers. Unfortunately, you can't pre-order the paperbacks, but I usually release those just a few days ahead of the ebooks, just to make sure everything goes through on time. And I'll keep you posted on when those are live on the stores. Okay, my time-traveling buddies, that is it for this episode. Have a great couple weeks, and I will hoot at you next time. The Book Owl Podcast is a production of Daisy Dog Media, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. The theme music was composed by Kevin MacLeod. Audio processing by ophonic.com.